That's
I don't know.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Smith, and welcome to the Truth Talks Live, a production of the Truth Movement New Brunswick. I'd like to welcome our regular panelists, Natasha, Sally, and Courtney. And we are very honored to have a special guest with us this evening, Elizabeth Weir. She is a party strengthening consultant and parliamentary strengthening consultant. Um, she served in the legislature for, I believe, from '88 until 2000, or you were the party leader of the New Brunswick, the NDP. Normally, I don't stumble over my words during an introduction. Second time ever. But to say that we're thrilled to have you here is a big understatement. So, welcome to the show. And maybe you'd like to start out by just telling us a little bit about what's going on now and the work that you're doing around the world. And, we focus specifically on leadership and, helping lift up women and what you do to contribute to that, to help women in the political arena all over.
Well, I'm delighted to, and I think I begin by saying, like everybody else, whatever I'm doing now is not quite what I would have been doing normally. So, as Jen said, I was a parliamentarian in the legislature here in New Brunswick for 14 years. And then following that, I was appointed to start up our province's energy efficiency agency. So I was a deputy minister for 6 years, and then decided that I wanted to run away and join the circus and actually have more control over my life and have more of a private life. So I began to do full time, sort of. What I've been doing as a volunteer over the previous 15 years, and that's assisting parliamentarians, parliamentary committees, women MPs, political party activists, civil society leaders, women and youth leaders with training and skills strengthening. And so now I have worked in over 28 countries. The other glamorous side of this life is I've been evacuated 6 times. I was in the earthquake in Nepal, and then evacuated because of, let's just say, challenging circumstances from a number of other countries. So I know how to get out of Dodge pretty quick.
That's pretty funny.
So now, because of the pandemic, I'm not getting to do what I really love, and that is work directly with, as I said, MPs, women political leaders, civil society leaders, and instead I'm working at home. And the organizations that I work with, there are 3 or 4, but I primarily work with the National Democratic Institute, which is a CSO out of Washington, and the United Nations Development Program. I did work for them in the South Pacific, among other places. So they have put me to work writing. So I have been developing content for induction programs for new MPs. I also have been doing some parliamentary assessments. And so I just did one. My last major project was for the Sri Lankan Parliament to do an assessment of training priorities, because they just had an election and now have quite a number of newly elected MPs. And then, of course, it's equally as important to think about how to strengthen the skills of parliamentary staff. So that's what I'm doing. But my preference would be to be working directly with people, and especially members of parliament, women members of parliament, because the value from my experience is I do share knowledge with them about, more effective techniques to do their jobs. But I think what I really give them is the confidence that they can do the job, because they certainly can. And it doesn't matter where you are in the world. When you are elected to parliament, It really is, I think, the only really, really, really important public job for which there is no training before you get elected. And yet, what I discovered very early on is that MPs in other countries think that when we are elected in established parliamentary systems, that we have all this training beforehand. So it really is a kind of newsflash moment for them when you say to them, if say Myanmar, if I wanted to be a medical doctor in Myanmar, what would I have to do? Well, Elizabeth, you'd have to go to a university and get a medical uh, degree. If I want to be a lawyer in Myanmar, what do I have to do? You have to go to a university law school and get accredited. And so I run through all the professions, and then I say to them, there is no university in the world. There is no higher education in the world that gives professional training and a degree in being a member of parliament. So this is a job you've got to learn by doing. You all have common sense. You've got skills to bring to bear, because it doesn't matter where someone is elected. It really does. It looks like the same group of people that we would elect. There are teachers, there are trade unionists, there are civil society leaders, there are lawyers, of course.
Goes without saying.
Yeah. And of course, previously, having been trained as a lawyer, I have some sympathy. So, when they hear that, it really is one of those, you see the lights go on in their heads. And then you can immediately say to them, sure, you're working in very challenging circumstances, because very often they may be elected and have no staff at Parliament, no staff in the constituency, no offices. It's like, hello, you're an MP, go do your job. So I will then say to them, okay, let's talk about how you can work effectively as an MP in these very challenging circumstances. And that's where we begin the conversation. Sometimes I'll be doing much more technical work, say with parliamentary committees, to improve their financial oversight skills. Gender oversight is really important. And actually, one of the sessions I did recently, which was with real people by Zoom, of course, was participating in presentation for a group of CSOs from South Asia, from Malaysia, the Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, to talk to them about the work that's being done on financial oversight of COVID spending and the gender impact of that. And there's some very impressive CSOs in the Southeast Asia, South Asia region who are developing tracking tools to track government expenditures. So they have the opportunity to really produce some results to try and identify where the deficiencies are, and then push for more gender-friendly spending and policies. So that was one session that I did recently. So it really depends on the program parameters for the organization, what the work is that I'll be doing. But I was literally holding my suitcase, ready to get on a plane to go to India and Myanmar when I got the call. I wasn't surprised, but it was, we're not doing any more travel until we know what's going to happen. So that was it. But I'm very lucky to have been able to continue doing work, this different work, than I have previously. So
this is kind of the new normal now, it seems, say on Zoom, and the meetings are few and far between. But I guess one of the first things I wanted to ask you is, when you're looking at, obviously, when you're traveling the world, you have different, cultures, so many different things come into play. And even in politics and in New Brunswick, obviously there's different oh my goodness. Okay. I'd like to just start over.
go right ahead.
Demographics and whatnot. So, like, do you have a template that you take to each, place that you're going, or like, because obviously you would have to know quite a bit about their demographics, their economy, their everything. There would be so much, I would think, that would come into play. So do you have like a template of advice, so to speak, or that you tweak with each place that you go, or does it take a long time to glean this information in order to give them the best advice in different places? Or I
Well,
guess.
you need to be a quick learner, and you need to be able to hear what people are saying to you, are the two things that I would respond. Now, the organizations that I work with, generally I'm in a situation where they have staff in the country, they've got offices in the country. And so the first thing I will do when I go is to get a briefing, an intensive briefing on, what is it that they want to accomplish while I'm working in the country? What are the challenges? What are the problems? And so that really brings me up to speed. And, I probably don't have a lot of time before I get there to actually try and put together program content. So we will try to do that collaboratively. But, especially if you are, if you're doing candidate training, those skills are transferable, whether you're doing it in St. John, New Brunswick, or you're doing it in Algiers, Algeria, there's some basic components. And the same thing with the work of an MP. There are really three baskets of responsibility that MPs have. You've got a responsibility for participating in legislative development and approval and scrutiny. Really important responsibilities around financial oversight, to participate in budget debate, budget review, whether you're on the Public Accounts Committee, which I think is probably the most important parliamentary committee that we have. And this will change depending on what kind of political, and what kind of constitutional structure the party has, or rather the country has, and that would be the responsibilities to represent citizens. So if you are in a political system like ours, which is first past the post, so you represent a defined constituency, people know who their MLA is or who their MP is, they will go to them if they have problems. Well, that situation is a bit different if you're in a situation of proportional representation. So you may have different structures. You may not have the same constituency representation responsibilities. So, you need to just adjust depending. And so, the content you would, again, adjust depending on the needs of the participants. And let me just say that before I go in, local participants, whether they're MPs or civil society leaders, political party, they will already have decided what it is that they want me to do. I mean, this is one of the reasons I work with the organizations that I work with. I would not ever participate in a situation where I'm going in and just talking at people. So prior to me going in, they will actually approve the content of the program, and they'll get my CV and be asked, is this someone that you think can assist with whatever your challenges are? And, it just makes such a huge difference. And I was very apprehensive when I started doing this, because I'm thinking, what can I share? Coming from little New Brunswick, right? The first place I went was Mozambique, speaking to a room full of parliamentarians that had been in a civil war for 30 years. And I'm thinking, what can I share? But I realized very quickly the point that I had made earlier, the job's basically the same. So they were immediately asking me about, well, constituents are unreasonable. They want me to do all these things. Or, the media are saying nasty things about me. What do I do? So, there's that. But because, they really have already decided I'm someone they want to hear from, there's never that barrier where,
Right.
you just don't know if you're speaking to a void or not. So that really helps. And, from time to time, it's also important for me to deliver some hard messages to them if there are not good practices that are going on. And there have been a few times, especially around social media use, where I'll have conversations with them about, okay, this member of parliament has posted this on social media. Can we talk about this? What do you think? Is there another way to respond or raise an issue? So that kind of exchange is possible. And for the most part, I mean, people are just very eager because they want to do a job on behalf of their citizens, and they feel this enormous responsibility, and whether or not they're up to the task. So that's the kind of dynamic. So the content you always adjust, but there's core principles and core content that is the same because parliaments are parliaments.
Of course. That's very insightful. Thank you so much. Natasha, did you want to ask a question or make a commentary, or do you want Sally to go first? You're muted, hon.
I'm always muted. Sally, go ahead.
You're muted too, Sally.
Oh, I just unmuted myself. Thank you so much for that incredible introduction, and thank you so much for sharing everything you are doing to better the system for the people, really is what you are doing. You're saying that you're not afraid to bring up when, practices are not, the way that they should be. What have been some of the most difficult conversations that you have had to have with individuals that you are trying to coach?
It's clearly easier to have those individual conversations, right? Because you're just one-on-one. What's more challenging is that sometimes you have to kind of do it in a group setting. And so it's, trying to bring out some of my latent diplomatic skills to make a point. And honestly, probably the most difficult has been around social media use, because there are many places where that's the primary medium. I mean, we think we're the predominant social media users in the world, but the predominant medium for MPs to communicate with citizens, like in a place like Myanmar, everybody's got the internet on their cell phone. They don't have landlines. And so they get all their news on Facebook. MPs are very active. And we also know that's a country where Facebook did not take appropriate action during the genocide to control some of the hate speech. And so those conversations, certainly can be challenging.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you too, Elizabeth. Did you want to ask Elizabeth anything, Courtney, or make a comment or an observation?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting that you're going to kind of different places around the world to, help people with their government. Do you do any sort of like outreach or initiatives with, like, say, younger girls, like maybe teenagers or younger, to try to get them interested in politics?
Do you mean here in New Brunswick or offshore?
Here or abroad, yeah.
Okay, well, I think both. And again, it really depends on the program that's being delivered by the organization that I work with. Like, I actually have no say in that. They've got funding to deliver these programs. So in some cases, though, we work with youth organizations and civil society. And to give you an example, Algeria, which is a fascinating country, first country to throw off a colonial oppressor. And you may have seen over pre-COVID, There was a huge popular movement of millions of people every Friday coming into the streets to protest. Young people in Algeria are completely disaffected and disenfranchised from the political parties in the country. They're seen as corrosive. And so, where talented young people with a drive to change their country and their community would be is in civil society organizations. And I was just so impressed with the thoughtfulness, the quality of leadership, and was so lucky to be brought in to work on a program that the Dutch government was actually funding to do kind of a leadership academy to help strengthen some of their skills, strategic thinking, planning, communications, all the basic skills that you could also use to be a political candidate and get elected to parliament. So there is some of that. And if I have the opportunity, obviously, if I have to choose between two projects, that would draw me to that project. So back at home, because when I took this turn of doing this work, it was partly too because I really wanted to try and recover something of a private life, because I had had very high media profile, very public life. And so this work offered me that opportunity as well. But I have been involved with an organization called Women for 50%. And we got together prior to the last election because the political parties were doing such a dismal job on ensuring that there was even lip service paid to gender equality in their candidate slates. And so we held a major conference, pressured the political parties. We're actually succeeded in getting changes to our Elections Act that provided a financial incentive for running women candidates, because I've certainly seen across the world, there's no silver bullet to gender equality. I mean, if we could get a constitutional amendment or an Elections Act amendment that would require gender balanced slates of candidates, that would be great. But we all know that's such a long haul. But many other countries have done that, and they've done it very successfully. But there are other things you can do, like this Elections Act change. So we were the first jurisdiction in North America to do this, which is one small step. But what we have seen is it hadn't gone off the party's radar that they needed to do a better job on nominating and electing women candidates. Now, we didn't have as many women nominated as candidates because of the snap COVID election. And I'm hoping that at some point there will be a really robust discussion about how disenfranchised women were who may have wanted to be candidates in this election. It was just shameful.
Too easier word.
Yeah. But that being said, we have the largest caucus of women in the Legislative Assembly that we've had in our political history, which is just better than what it has been, but it is not where it should be. And if I could just throw in one more thing, because I realized in a number of places that I've been, they are in a situation where they're writing new constitutions, right? And it struck me that we don't pay enough tribute or think about what we have actually accomplished in Canada, because my generation of women participated in writing gender equality into our Canadian Constitution. And what we had to do to make that happen is actually a really good teaching moment when I'm talking with women activists or MPs, and they're looking at constitutional change in their countries, because it was not easy for us, as you may remember. It was taken out of the draft of the Constitution, and in a really pre-social media time, women were able to institute a massive national lobby that succeeded in getting gender equality back in the Constitution. That was huge. I don't think we've really appreciated how huge that was. So that's also a good experience to share and to talk about just some of the strategies that were used in situations where women are also looking in other countries to incorporate gender into their constitutional framework.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Very good.
good.
Thank you. Natasha, did you want to make a comment any in here now or?
Sure. I also want to echo that thank you for that amazing information that you gave us, and it's really great what you do, and I wish more people knew about it, because I think that
They will now.
really, yeah, that's the part of the goals of our show. So I think it's really important to get that out. A lot of people will go in almost sort of blind, and it's important to have people who know what they're doing in parliaments, both here and around the world. So just sort of like a comment to everything that we do. One of the founding principles of our women's coalition is intersectional feminism. And that's why I joined, that's why some of us joined. And um, how there is now, New Brunswick is relatively new to non white populations. And yet, in the last 20 to 30 years, there has been a growing, steadily growing population of different ethno-cultural communities. And you don't see them involved in the political process. They're not visible even on minor level. And yet they're here and they're contributing, and I think we've discussed that in many of our shows, and it's really important as we've all seen to be involved in the political process. um, I can almost parallel it with the effect of the women's movement that had on our countries. Like, I'm from Asia, and very patriarchal communities initially. And when the women's movement happened, it had a reverberating impact on our countries as well. And yet there was a huge resistance to having women involved in the political process, and much less electing them to parliament. And yet there was a strong encouragement, I think, from outside agencies who were coming in and who were training our, our politicians, and they strongly encouraged that women be involved, and they took that advice, which was great. But the population was so resistant that they had to establish minimum quotas in order to, so that really the population did not have a choice and knew they had to elect women to those seats. Because if they had not established those quotas, we would never have gotten women into parliament at all. So, and once they got in and they did an effective job, and people could see, well, women can actually be parliamentarians and they're not fundamentally incapable of doing that, it set a tone, and it carried forward. And now they could, after about 20 years, they were able to remove the quotas because people were open to electing women as politicians. So as you mentioned, like, you've come a long way here. That's, it's not the situation it was before, but I see parallels that happened with the multicultural communities here, and they're here, and it's a very large chunk of the population. It's 10%, 10 to 15% in cities, and yet they're not represented anywhere. What is your opinion on encouraging policymakers to consider establishing quotas, minimum quota, so you can have at least one person who is of a different background than everyone else who is in parliament, because it does make a difference. It absolutely does. And what is your opinion on that?
Well, I'm certainly supportive of the use of whatever tools, such as quotas, that we can use to drive representation and participation. And I think you're absolutely right. I've worked in a number of countries where quotas have been used, and sometimes you see a transition I mean, to me, one of the great success stories is Tunisia, where in their constitution that they adopted unanimously after the revolution. It took a few years. They had challenges, of course. We know constitutional challenges. Um, but in their constitution, they embraced gender equality at all levels, federal, national, provincial, municipal levels. And they also incorporated a requirement in their election laws to push the parties to do better by requiring, the term you use is a zipper list. So when the party goes in with its list of candidates, there has to be woman, man, woman, man, woman, man. And the other thing you need to make sure is that if a woman resigns her seat in parliament, that the rules are written such as another woman has to be elected to replace her, because we've seen quotas diminished in some places by the absence of that. So that's in terms of gender representation, but generally, I think that we need a kind of basket of measures. Yeah. And part of what we need is a really hard look at our political parties and the entrenched leadership in the political parties. And it isn't, given the issue that you're raising, it isn't obviously just on gender. And, you know, I see part of the poverty of thoughtful leadership inside political parties is also because we have made being a politician something not to be admired, right? And I know that by the time I left being leader, I lost count of the number of people that I would have sat down and talked to about running to be a candidate who would have made such a contribution to the province, to their community, but they would look at me, and social media was only really beginning to come in then, but they would look at me and say, why would I want that job, right? Why would I want that job? Because they knew enough, they had friends who were elected or saw the kind of pressures, the abuse, and it, as you know, it has only accelerated since then. So even though I will say, you know, I think we need to shake up the dinosaur political parties that we have, it's all of our responsibility to think about how we talk about the people we elect, because we give them one of the most challenging jobs in the world, and we just hurl criticism and abuse, and we all lose as a result, because as I say, the people who could enrich our province by thoughtful decision making, they don't want to take the job. So all of us as citizens, I think, need to look in the mirror and have a little talk about how we talk about elected people. And even more so for women, because there's the added issue of abuse and violence that is more prevalent. So I think this is just the basis of a really important conversation that we need to have as a province and look at. You know, there's no silver bullet to gender equality. There's no silver bullet to equality, but there are a whole range of things that we can do that will make the situation better. And I just think it's overdue for us to have that conversation, especially as we have more people moving in from different countries around the world that are just making our province such a better place to live, bringing their community and their love for their adopted country with them. So I think that's a really important initiative.
That's actually, thank you. Thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Elizabeth. we've been talking about this for the entire time that we've been doing these shows, and created this movement and tried to, include so many different, people and from different backgrounds. And I'm going to go with Courtney actually here in a second. But before I do, I just wanted to, like, okay, just say, for example, and this may seem minor, of course, to a lot of people, they think I'm being probably unreasonable. But when I went to fill out my MLA candidate papers, all the words, the pronouns were all he, him, his, things like that. Like, I just find it so striking that even in 2020, there are paperwork, and the elections in New Brunswick people were so helpful and full of
Yeah,
resources,
they're
and
great.
they were wonderful.
Yeah,
But my gosh, isn't it time? Like, there's just so many, barriers and obstacles and things that we have to do, and we have to work twice as hard to get, um, just the simple things like that would be more, make women. The point I want to make is that I feel that there are not enough women now in our political establishments here, period, and anywhere. And it's because, people, it's been said to me recently, well, these are elected positions. This is who came forward, it's not our fault, it's a man. And I'm like, okay, that's fair. Yes, of course, it's democratic in that way. Yes, absolutely. But what it's telling me is that these institutions, all of these political institutions, are not making it a welcome place for women to want to work, for women to want to run, for women that will feel that they're going to be supported. So there's work to be done, and we need that acknowledgement that, just step back and say, what can we do differently that will bring more women to put the effort through and feel like they, like, I know I can make a difference. There's many of us that know that we can make a difference, but holy, getting a seat at that table is quite a challenge. Like, just weaving your way through it, as a female, it's
That's why
um
I'm a raging, insane activist.
yeah.
I don't feel like there's a chair on that table for me. I don't.
Yeah.
Like Natasha, I've been discriminated against in incredibly violent and disgusting ways. Recently, I found out that the Human Rights Commission does not have one single seat occupied by a person of color. Not one. And our parliament is busy discussing female reproductive rights when we don't even discuss women's well-being after losses of children or missed pregnancies or infertility or hormone problems, which are all major issues that actually affect our population, that affect the quality of life of our population, that affect the health of our population. Mental health seems to not matter if it's a person of color at all. Like, you just
Or
need to kind of
anybody.
suck up the way. But it's even worse when you're a person of color, because you just have to adapt to the fact that you just need to accept that you don't fit in this province, is the impression that I am given. And I'm the first generation born in Canada. So I have been here for 36 years with an undetected accent, white passing because of my light skin. But it's, I mean, I'm sorry to kind of like jump in and intervene, but it's so disheartening to see what we see in our parliament and in our provincial government right now. Just, they're discussing my right to reproduce, but they're not even discussing my right to face abuses or my right. They don't want to make racism illegal. They don't want to make discrimination illegal. Like, but they want to make human reproductive rights illegal. Like, it blows my mind. I mean, for how can we knock this out with a bat? Like, there is no nice way of knocking it out. There is no nice way. We're trying to be nice. And, we have people of color who run for politics. We have women who run for politics. And then all of a sudden we're talking about sex pictures and sexting or whatever. Shame on her. Yet we can ridicule the woman nonstop, but the man who will disrespect his wife or be doing the same thing. There's such a double standard. And I agree, we have to be nicer to our politicians, but I feel that our current elected officials have a major advantage with the fact that everyone whose voice matters, they're not being mean to them. That's why they're there. That's why they're elected. And I believe that it's a cultural problem that we have in this province, not just a political problem. I'm sorry to intervene. It's just,
No,
to me, it's beyond the point of politics. It's literally cultural.
Go ahead.
Okay, and don't misunderstand me. If I use the word nice, that's not what I meant to say. It's respectful. I think we have to return an element of respect to get the kind of people like you or other people that you want to run and get elected. It has to be a place of respect for women. But that doesn't mean you have to be nice to them or easy. You have to be, believe me, you have to be tough. So
I was going to say, as somebody that has likely made people just, like shut their mouth and listen and look and quietly, in your political career, I know I'm well aware of it. Courtney might be a bit young, but those of us that have been around for enough years, we saw you in action. And I think Courtney wanted to mention something else there. Go ahead, Courtney.
I wanted to ask this sort of quickly just to get your opinion on it. So I don't know if you saw that the mayor of Paris is getting fined for electing women to the city council. And I just wanted to sort of ask your opinion about the idea of the pendulum. So the idea that, if we want to get, sort of equality, then, men, I think, are afraid that we're going to get too much, but it might be that, the pendulum has to swing a little more in our favor and before it'll settle back in the middle. So I just kind of wanted to hear what your thoughts were about that.
Well, I did. I just roared when I read that. This is, if you didn't see the media piece, the mayor of Paris has to pay a fine because there are too many women occupying positions. And it brought me back to Ruth Bader Ginsburg's response about, how many women on the Supreme Court? Well, 9, right?
Yeah.
9. But I also laugh because I think it is such a classic example of French bureaucracy gone insane. And I have enough friends living in France that I have seen other examples. But I want to get back to making political change in Canada. And that is, my sense is, and I'm out of the country so much that I'm really not well connected, but that the robustness of our national women's movements has been somewhat diminished from the days where they really were they were the principal leaders in the fight for constitutional change. And that has really impoverished us all. But there are, we are making, gains, and we need to keep those in mind and know about them. And so put up your hand if you know that we have a province in Canada that has a majority of women in its government caucus. A provincial government where there are more women than men in the caucus. That's British Columbia. How did they do that? Well, one of the ways they did it was that they, in their nomination process, they adopted a scheme as a political party that if a male MP incumbent wasn't running again, right? There were requirements for the candidacy. So women, people from immigrant communities, more inclusive representation. And that's how they did it. As a political party, they changed the rules. So quotas are an example where constitutions can change the rules on gender. So there are places that with some tactical thought focus, it's possible to make that change. But Sally, I hear exactly what you were saying about the political parties in New Brunswick, and that's part of why I did my slam as well on a couple of fronts. But that said, it's also my observation that, again, for so many people, that this is just not something they want to take on, and we're losing the people that we need to make not just the legislature, but to make our political parties different places, more representative places, robust, energetic.
Yeah, I
Places,
hear you.
political parties that'll make change, not just try to hold on to the status quo.
That's right. Yeah,
So would you think
yeah.
that this is an opportunity for new political parties to step in?
Yeah, that's a hard row.
It sure is. Sally and I were actually, sorry to interrupt you. Sally and I were talking about this the other day, and it does take many, many years to get something like that going. And actually, we are like over time. I feel like there's been two shows, Gina Haddit's and you right now. Like, I feel like we've only been on this show for 5 minutes. I swear to goodness. Do you guys all feel that way? Like, there's just not enough. I feel like there's much more that I want to ask and talk about. And I feel like these guys probably do. I don't know. These guys do too. It just went like that so fast. And that's like we've gone over 45 minutes, and we really try to honor our 45-minute commitment to our guests, our viewers, ourselves. And we would be, I can't even say enough thank you. I feel like we just touched a little bit. Would you come back at some point in time, maybe after Christmas, so that we can delve into a couple of these issues a little deeper to help women here, specifically in New Brunswick? Because I know Natasha and I, oops, sorry, hit my computer. Natasha and I would say have personally faced those barriers.
Yeah.
And as women that have run in that snap election, which was not fair. It was like just right. And I've, helped in political campaigns for a number of years, and it was just so off the wall different in every single way.
Oh, yeah.
Every single way. So I mean, it's not even a normal election to compare things to, but like, we really need the help of people like you. And given our audience and our our depth and our diversity and the demographics, we'd really like just be so honored if you would return sometime, if you're not too busy, in the new year maybe, so that we can touch on this a little further, if you don't mind.
Look, I'd absolutely be delighted, because again, if there's one thing I can do, it's try and share not always the good experiences, but where you can try and learn, and maybe what we can do is just pick some themes and focus discussion.
Yes.
But yeah, I'd love to. Thank you.
Yep. We want the ugly truth, and to talk about the ugly
Thank
truth.
you.
No, we really do.
Your
Thank
honesty is always
you.
refreshing.
We need to. Yeah. No, this is what we're all about. We're called the Truth Movement and the Truth Talk. So, and sometimes the truth is uncomfortable, but that's how you work through these things. So, thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, for your insight, for your knowledge, for your helping others around the world, for helping women, for helping us. You're just such an icon here, and we're just entirely thrilled to have you. Thank you, Sally, Courtney, and Natasha, all of you beautiful women. I love you all so much, and we thank you to the viewers, and we will be back again. I'm not sure if we're going to get back before the new year, but we may try to sneak one little quick special in before the end of the new year. But if not, we'll see everybody in the new year. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, whatever it is that you're celebrating this time of year. Enjoy it. Please have peace. Be well. Take care of yourselves. Truth Talks out.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Have a good night,
Thanks,
everybody.
Take care.